Is there anybody there?
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to this week's edition of So You Want to Be in IT. If you've been here before, you know what we're about. But for all you new folks out there, we are a podcast aimed at those starting out their journey in the vast world of IT. We talk about breaking into IT from a beginner standpoint, right? So either you're right out of college or changing careers, or if you maybe just got into IT and looking for the next rung of the ladder, we're here to help with all of that. So again, everything from climbing the ladder, management, breaking in, and everything in between. So I'm your host, Pat, as usual, hanging out here. You can find me on Twitter at PatAllen182, and you can find the show on Twitter at SYWBIIT, the acronym for So You Want to Be in IT. And we're pretty active on Twitter, so come say hello. Dean Mac hanging out over here. Dean's on Twitter at DeanMacUK. What's up, Dean? How you doing?
Hey guys, hey Pat, how's it going, man? Long time no speak.
I know. No, it's been a couple days, so we're trying to keep up with the weekly thing here. So some schedules got knocked out of whack, so we're doubling up this week as far as recording. So you guys will hear, stay on track with us, and we're trying to bring you some content and stay relevant, and consistency is the key. But I was waiting for this podcast. This was the one I was super excited about because we have the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. John Capobianco on with us. I hope I said your name right, John.
You nailed it. You nailed it. That was perfect.
Did
Thanks,
I?
Pat. That's great.
Nice. Good deal. I studied in school. Yeah. So we're all good. Oh, yeah. John's here with us. John, man, it's been a long time coming. I know you reached out to us on Twitter a while ago to come on the show. And, we've gotten more acquainted on Twitter and some of your work and things of that nature. And we couldn't be more excited for you to be here and hang out and chat with us. So thanks, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm equally excited, and I did reach out a while ago now to offer my support. And this is really close to my heart. We were talking before we got started. I've been in IT a long time now, but I am so passionate about the impact it can have on someone's life, on society, on communities. It moving for me personally, getting into IT changed absolutely everything about the quality of my life and my day-to-day experience, where I got to go do, my career and work. So thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this discussion.
It's our pleasure.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's huge that you're here. And I really like the way you frame that. I'm a true believer in that too. IT is definitely enhanced and redefined my lifestyle completely and accomplish a lot of my personal goals. So I think it's huge that you brought that to the table and to the forefront to our listeners.
Well, I know for me personally, I've been fortunate, and I don't want to, I have to mention my privilege that I got a home computer when I was very young and when they were very new. So when they were still a hobby in your garage, you put together what they called an IBM clone and you built your own kind of Frankenstein computer. And that was for me, it was like 1986, 88, somewhere around there. So a very long time ago. And yeah, so I've been lucky that I've always had computing as part of my upbringing. But I found myself, I went to university out of high school and didn't last very long. I was an arts major and it just didn't click with me. And I found myself on academic probation. So I took a job at the aluminum factory to help, get a job. My dad worked there as a millwright and was able to get me into the production side of things, working on heavy gauge, heavy metal, aluminum machines and forklift operations and pack lines. And they call them tension levelers. And after a few years of working 12-hour shifts doing that, days and midnights, rotating 12-hour shifts, I really wanted to change my life and really wanted to do something different. So I went back to school in the community college in the computer programmer analyst course. So I know I'm a network engineer now, but when I went back to school, I went to a 3-year computer programming course, that, we wrote everything from C++ to Java, COBOL, Kix, Visual Basic. We wrote some real applications. And there was a component of networking to that community college program as well. So that I
Beautiful.
graduated in 2003 to give you a rough time frame. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Nice.
So you have been in industry for a considerable amount of time.
So the one advantage of the community college program was that we got a job placement in our final year. So my placement was with the Ontario Ministry of Health. And yes, I would say since about 2002, I've been in IT in one shape or form or another. What's interesting, and at the time it was difficult, but my placement was more in what I would consider IT, networking, client server, storage, connectivity, help desk, building systems, installing software, that type of stuff. But I went to school to learn how to write programs. So when I graduated, I sort of had a lack of computer programming experience in the field, but I had a diploma in programming, but I had this sort of A plus, N plus level of field experience with the Ministry of Health without any certifications or diploma. Like my diploma was in programming. So that was challenging because then I wasn't confident enough in my own abilities as a programmer, even a junior programmer. I did do one QA contract. So that was my first contract once I graduated college. I got a 3-month contract in quality assurance in Toronto. And then at the end of that contract, I went back into the IT side of things for a value-added reseller in downtown Toronto for a 6-month contract. So it wasn't full-time, but the way I looked at it, I doubled the length of my next contract. So things got a
Right.
little better, right, with my second contract. But that was building Windows servers primarily and doing break-fix work in the Bay Street area of Toronto. So the financial sector, for example. And that
Okay,
may be a
nice.
lot to unpack. Do you have any kind of questions about where I'm at in my journey so far?
No, that's pretty clear. What made you gravitate to sort of the computing industry? You said you had a computer at a very young age. Was that your choice, a parent's choice, someone really who influenced family kind of deal, or how did that come into fruition?
It's my, yeah, my parents at the time, everyone was hearing about computers were the future and, you know, kids should get involved in computers. I guess not much has changed. People still talk about that, but in the mid 80s, it was like, it was really revolutionary stuff. This was before Windows or anything, right? So multimedia wasn't here. The Windows 95 era wasn't here. But my younger brother and I kind of together, what really made it click, Dean, was building up a bulletin board system. And that's what
Okay.
got the hook into me into technology, was letting other people dial into my computer through their modem and to figure out how to set up a BBS, with that technology. And at that age, I was about 14, maybe 12. That really was neat that, okay, the computers, standalone computers were pretty neat. We could play video games on them and make spreadsheets and do things. But once we connected them, once the three of us, like right now, are able to, from different parts in the world, have a conversation with video and audio through the computer, that was different. That really, something clicked that I thought I would enjoy working with that telecommunications side of things, I guess.
Okay. So it was like the broader aspect of multiple computers, like the internet, like the infrastructure of the internet that appealed to your sort of curious nature.
Yeah, and just connecting with people and all around the world. I don't know. I think it all goes together, but one of the early computer programs was PC Globe, which let you pick on a country and you could hear their national anthem and look at their flag and how many people lived in the country. Now we have the ability to connect. Like I've had similar conversations like this with people in Nigeria and Brazil, and you probably have a similar experience now where you're sharing and connecting with a global audience.
for sure.
It's just, I don't know, it's fascinating to me that we can come together to solve problems and to get to know each other and, I don't know, be more connected as human beings, right? And that it's the technology that allows for that to happen. So, but as for why, I guess specifically why I gravitated, so I think that's why I moved back into the IT side of things, building networks, for example, versus computer programming and writing software. But
Okay.
if we flash forward, 15 or 20 years, that software lifestyle and writing programming, it's now available to us for things like networks or clouds or compute. You used to have to build networks, network by network, CLI by CLI. And now we can use things like Python or Ansible or whatever and write programs to automate the deployment or the configuration or the monitoring or whatever. So it's almost come full circle for that programming diploma that I felt like I never really put to use. Now it's like a vital part of my everyday to day job because the network has evolved to become this programmatic thing, right?
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And you're more efficient as an engineer when you start to automate repetitive tasks.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I'll be the first one to admit that I am not the best at Python. I'm learning more of it and learning to uh, build it from the ground up sort of thing. And I can take a Python script if you put one in front of me and tell you what's going on line by line. But if you put a blank page in front of me and say, okay, build this to change switch ports on a VLAN and log in and do all this stuff, I'm like, it's one of those kind of things. So you have to, with the programming language, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, with any sort of programming language, well, especially I'm speaking of Python and Ansible, since those are the two that I have the most experience with in the network world, you have to start at the bottom and build block by block or brick by brick. Is that a true statement in that aspect of then finally having a fully running automated script?
Yeah, I'm a big fan, and you're right. It's kind of modular task by task. So Ansible, I think that's why Ansible's so successful because the playbook is made up of nice modular tasks. It's written in YAML, so it's human readable, and you can kind of go block by block and say, okay, I see they're adding a VLAN here. They're adding a static route here. They're writing memory here. They're gathering information and making a CSV file here. It's nice and easy to read that YAML. It might not be easy to write. And maybe, you know, uh, I'm being broad and general when I say that YAML is easy to read. I think it is. I think that's the appeal to Ansible. But I find something like Python, you can almost line up that Ansible playbook task by task and put it side by side and say, okay, how would I do that same command or same step in a Pythonic way, right? Using a library or writing my own for loop or my own API call. Whether or not one's easier or harder, I've heard mixed things. It comes up a lot because I wrote a book on Ansible, but now I seem to favor Python more. And I think that would be a true statement. I favor Python a little more now. And why that is and which one I find easier. I think that either is better than nothing, right?
Right.
Either is better than going device by device.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to insult anyone who's still there. And I know this is about beginners and you want to get into IT. Just try to keep it in your mind that automation really is achieving those same steps that a human would do. So you have to still understand those initial steps. What is a VLAN? What is the command to create one? What is a static route? What is a next hop? What is
Right.
a subnet mask? So there is still a barrier to entry that you have to have some basic, I would say, CCNA and N plus level of network understanding if you're going to be successful in automating it. That's why I like the DevNet Associate kind of track, because there's still 20% foundational network in that course or that exam. But the rest of it explores more modern approaches to working with that 20% of the network foundation. I think CCNA is obviously still one of the better entry, and it's hard to even call it entry level. That's a very difficult exam. It's a
I
lot of
agree.
studying from zero to CCNA, or
Yep.
maybe from zero to Network Plus to CCNA. That
Yeah.
I maintain it the most difficult Cisco exam I've ever written, possibly the most difficult overall exam I've ever written. And I've written a significant number of Microsoft exams, CompT exams, Cisco exams, obviously. But the doors that it opened for me, talking about, so you want to be in IT, that CCNA made me very attractive as a candidate. It certainly elevated my status from, at the time, a senior desktop engineer, moved over and in a server, moderate server level of responsibility. Well, they moved me right to the networking team, almost a senior level after I got my CCNA.
Wow.
So there was a lot of, I've written, I started as a Microsoft engineer and then moved to the network because of a reorg. And as part of that move, they sent me on a boot camp, and that changed absolutely everything for me. And I still am very passionate about building networks. And then after my NA, I got my design associate. And here's just if people want to know about it, if you want to automate your network.ca/about, it's my about page. I have my full career history there and every cert I've written. I didn't pass them all in my first attempt either. I'm not a superhuman. I'm not a living computer or anything. I've been in the industry for 20 years. So if I maintained a 1 year, I tried to write an exam a year once I realized that my A+ was valuable, and overall, I could say that I enjoyed the experience of buying the big exam books, studying, writing the exam, passing the exam, getting a certification. That whole thing really appealed to me early in my career, and I was getting more opportunities with these certifications. So my A+ and then my N+, and then some Microsoft desktop exams. It was Vista at the time, XP at the time, right? And I think the industry is very much the same, that I think we used truckers. If you're a trucker who wants to move into IT, I was a steel worker and I wanted to move into IT.
Right.
There are, moderately difficult. It's not like going to 4 years university degree that you've got to, finance your life away and go take a 4-year degree to become successful in IT.
Sure.
That wasn't my experience. The combination of a community college diploma and some certifications was enough for me. And I don't know that 20 years is a long time in technology. There was no Pluralsight or CBT Nuggets or Educative.io, or I'm going to miss some platforms here, but you get the idea.
Yeah, sure.
Totally.
Public knowledge, free online training, learn at your own pace. If that was available to me, I don't know that I would have left, work 12-hour shifts and then gone to college in the daytime. I could have
Yeah.
done it at my own pace online.
Web 1.0 was barely a thing.
Yeah, I know. So I guess I'm trying to encourage people that if you're dissatisfied in your career, or maybe what you're doing right now, or you want to go back to the workforce if you've already retired. I used to be a professor, and about a third of my students were retirees, like military retirees or other retirees who wanted to work. They were getting a pension. They still wanted to go back to work, and they felt IT was a good second career for them. You
Nice.
could just sit on YouTube and watch videos for a few hours a day and have a decent shot at probably your N+, A+ CCNA. I don't know. What do you find? Like, you guys are
Agree.
really encouraging people to be in IT. Is it still similar to that path of get an A+, N+, get into the help desk, and then keep climbing the ladder into the network or into the server?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty much not changed at all. Just like the syntax of iOS has not changed very much. It's still the way you built a state right when you land, it's still the same way. I know you do fancy automation now, but granted, it's still IP route, and then some things don't change. It doesn't need to change. It works. It works well. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I'm curious of that, John, because we've talked about this before we hit the record button, but the ever changing or the ever fire burning question of, do you need formal college or university versus getting your A+, Net+, Sec+, right? And so for security folks out there, that's your meal ticket in, one versus the other, right? And I've known folks that do both, right? Or that are in both camps, right? Going for formal school and doing their information technology or information science, whatever they classify it as, and then going that way. And then I know folks that just break in on an A+ or a Net+ and gain experience that way, and their minds just click in that space, and they do very well with it. So there is no, to me, there is no cookie cutter way of saying, okay, yeah, you have to go to 4-year school and then do this and then do this. Everyone's path is different, I think. And I think it just depends on how your mind works. And, because some people are great students, some people are not. That's just the way the world works. So
I'm going to cut you off and say something even more controversial, because that's just the kind of guy I am.
Write it down. Here we go.
In my opinion, I find, and you don't have to agree with me on this, but most of the engineers I've come across are more sharper and more switched on and can gravitate to concepts quicker. I'm not the ones who are formally educated. The ones who don't have the 4-year degrees, the ones who have grinded it out and worked their way up. Those guys are generally, in my experience, I can't speak for everybody, but in my experience, are the sharpest. But and I've been around for a while. But if I'm comparing like formal education to the guys who haven't had formal education, the guys who don't have formal education in tech are way sharp. And you can even see that with like big people in tech like Bill Gates, Elon Musk. These guys are huge, and Steve Jobs, and they even went back and got their degree. I'm not saying the degree slows you down or it's not required or there's no value there, but just looking at it, comparing apples to apples, two people in industry who are at the top of their game, usually the one who doesn't have the 4-year cookie cutter degree is generally sharper.
I would tend to agree with that. I tend to think that, or I tend to see, I should say, that folks that are very sharp minded, like Dean said, and it generally clicks for them and they get it, are the folks that they tinkered with things, right, with a computer on a kitchen table or in a bedroom, and they tore it apart and put it back together, and they cut their teeth on their on that laptop or on that computer or whatever they're working on, and then they apply that knowledge is easily applicable to them in their head. It makes sense in their head when they hit the real world and they have real world IT problems. I tend to agree with Dean as far as those guys that are really high up there are guys that aren't formally educated. And again, not saying it's not worth it. It just depends on the person. It depends on who you are, how you learn, things of that nature. And there's certainly value there. It just seems to me that some people just get it quicker than others, or it clicks better in some personalities versus others.
Yeah, I don't want to be a gatekeeper at all. I think that there's room for everyone. And I think that the numbers prove that there's more demand than supply for IT, especially in the security field. I mean, Canada, I read it in I don't know if it was the Globe and Mail, but a big Canadian newspaper had some statistic of Canada has a 30,000 person IT deficit in IT security. Now, they will take you if you have a 4-year CS degree or if you have your security plus. So I think there's a level of investment, obviously a 4-year computer science degree is an extremely meaningful and powerful achievement and accomplishment. I was teaching in community college. I taught at St. Lawrence for about 3 years in Kingston, Ontario. There were a few students that were CS graduates that went back to community college to get a little bit more of the hands-on. They weren't doing labbing in the computer science degree. They were writing algorithms, and it was closer to calculus than it was CLI command.
It's not really networking or IT, is it? It's data science. Like I've been a part of that, and yeah, you do learn Python. Python is not just for automating networks; it's for like data science, crunching numbers, doing calculations. It's a programming language. It's huge.
Yeah, it's a broader program than that.
I mean, it's so many multiple uses for it. Any part in the networking, there's other uses for it in multiple different industries. And just trying to cross apply those skills is quite difficult to manage.
It's so versatile. I know with Blender, so a 3D animation software, it has BPY, Blender Python. So if you're into like 3D worlds and doing animation software, things like that, and you want to get into IT is broad. I know we sort of have this narrow focus of Cisco network, compute, storage, cloud, security. There's project management. There is, I don't know,
Right.
all kinds of different niches and facets to IT. And then if you look at the development side of things, there's front-end development, back-end development, middleware. There's just the digital world. There's a lot of ways to participate in it and make careers in it. And I tell you what, when I went to the factory, there was a chance that I could lose a limb or lose my life. People in that factory that I worked in were killed on the job. I'd never put my life on the line since moving in IT. Okay. CD-ROMs don't come flying at you, taking your head off in the data center. It's a nice, safe, comfortable living where you're working in a pretty good environment. You're a knowledge worker. So you're there for ideas and your thoughts and your problem solving. I find it to be extremely rewarding, just in general as a career. If you're wondering, do you really want to be in IT? It really is. You enjoy solving problems. And do you enjoy using digital tools to solve those problems, right?
Yeah. Even, to be honest with you, I solve my most intrinsic problems with pen and paper still, believe it or not. I don't use a computer to solve problems.
Or pen and paper, yeah.
I use a computer
pseudocode
to prove my
most
problems.
Most of automation.
Yeah, it's all pen and paper. You just can't beat that, sadly.
That's right. Because you were talking about small tasks and automation and getting started. Most of my stuff does start as human ideas in pen and paper that write pseudocode, and it's not even really pseudocode, but right, can I connect to the device, connect to multiple devices, authenticate, issue a command, write the memory, right? Like it really is just a sequence of ideas. And then it's a matter of finding the syntax. And that for me still means Stack Overflow and Google and API documentation. I don't just know this stuff. I have to look up a lot of it, but right, what is the syntax to make a for loop and add 4 VLANs instead of 1 VLAN, right? Can I add 1? Okay, now can I add multiple VLANs? And you scaffold on your success, and over time you get better and better at it, like any other skill.
It's true.
Like subnetting, if we just throw that out there.
Yep.
People say, I don't know anything about automation. Well, before you got your CCNA, you didn't know anything about subnetting either.
Sure.
And when you started subnetting, did it not seem like the most impossible thing? How do people just look at this and know that I need a router or I'm in the same broadcast domain? 15 years later, I can basically look at 2 IPs and say they need a router or not. But that's experience.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Even with a little automation I done, like you said, starting real simple, connecting to a device. I just changed the name of it, write it to memory, reload it. And then you just build on top of that. You take that function, you add a little bit more, it breaks, you fix the function, and then you create a new functional ideas and you reuse a bit of code there. And then you're like, oh yeah, this is like a full-fledged thing and I don't actually have to do anything anymore. I can just press run and here we go. So it is, I agree with that. It is just baby steps and just playing with it, really. Just like have an idea in your head and just all I wanted to do, my one accomplishment for the day was, all I want to do is just change the name of this switch to my name. That's all I want to do. And I don't want to press a key. I just want it to ask me what name I want to name it.
Perfect.
That's what I wanted to do. And it was just look that up. People have done that. And just implement it and try it. Trial and error. A lot of programming I kind of feel was trial and error. So that's my 5 cents worth. But I had a really good time programming in Rex, Python, and a tiny bit of Java too. So yeah.
Yeah, I do feel like the network automation space is really going to take off in the next couple of years, and it's here now, right? That's not to say it's coming, right? It's here. We all know it's here. I think that network automation is going to be another tool in your tool belt if you're going to be on the network side of things to know, right? As far as, how do you make things more efficient? How do you free up your time? How do you reduce human error, right? Because a lot of, I saw a statistic somewhere, I can't remember the actual thing, but the gist of the statistic was a lot of outages, big broad outages, are caused by human error. So if you can automate that, test it, automate it, make sure it works, then you're eliminating the human error aspect of, I put a static route in wrong. Now I black holed YouTube, that kind of thing. So
but you have to be careful with automation because you can break stuff faster too. It's like having a machine gun going wrong. Like you can if your programming's crappy and you automate stuff, you break it, and trust me, you break it fast and you can't fix it. You can't fix it fast. It's like, make sure your code is tip top. But no, I agree with you in that saying. And what also led me to automation was we had a problem at a clinical facility where we had 52 switches where I had to basically get the show text, and I don't want to log into 52 switches. That's nonsense.
Yeah, stupid.
So it is stupid, and run the same command over and over again. You just it gets to a point where you just, human nature dictates you become lazy. You're like, there's got to be a better way for that. I can't do that. Like, logging into 52 switches, the same username and password, and doing show tech, capturing that output and put it into a text file is relatively simple. It's brain dead for a human. So it's a relatively simple task in automation to do, providing you sort of have your kind of like cooking or bakery steps kind of deal. That's how I kind of view it. So it just like you said, frees up time, gives you more.
You nailed it, Dean. So what I like about what you just said there, I like everything that both of you guys just said. I'm like nodding in agreement for anyone who can't see me with a big smile. One, like, I am lazy. That's a secret driving me. If I had 50 switches and they want the show tech, you go, really? Like, I'm going to spend my whole day logging into these, gathering. Now just think of the friction there. Did I hit every one of the devices? Did I save the file with the right name for the right switch that I was on for each one of the? That's still not a trivial thing for a human to do successfully, manually, right? There's a lot of opportunity to get that wrong.
For sure.
And then automation comes along and it's like, you press enter, and because of the speed of Python, that would be done in a few seconds. I mean, it really would, because PyATS like forks and connects to all 50 at once. And the other thing is, Dean, it's safe. It's safe. You didn't start with like, can I change the default route everywhere through automation? Right. Can I add, like some people get really hung up on automation equals configuration management. I think configuration management's a part of network automation. It shows perfect at scale. What's the one thing every network is lacking? Documentation. What is the perfect use case for network automation? Documentation. If they go hand in hand, we can solve long-standing problems. We can, and I don't want to say lazy, I can focus on higher value propositions for my organization. They're not paying me the money they're paying me because I know the show tech command. and know how to log into 50 devices to run
Right.
it.
Yeah,
Like, that's really not adding the value to your enterprise.
it's not.
If you were to step back and say, give me an hour and I'll script this
Yep.
in something we can reuse every time we need a show tech from every device. Like, there's so much value there, Dean.
It's huge. Yeah, it's huge value. Like you said, you can reuse that. You can give that to lower techs, impart that knowledge, show them automation stuff. It just builds from there, really. And then everyone in the organization, not just the techs, but at leadership, management, they see the value in what automation really does provide and how much we're able to leverage by just piecing together some code. It's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Pat said, you brought up tools, Pat, and that to me is like, you had mentioned to Dean like 20 years ago, it wasn't even Web 1.0 or whatever. And it's kind of funny how long I've been around, but like almost overnight, I've gone from Putty and Notepad, maybe Notepad++,
Nice.
to VS Code and WSL and Ubuntu and Docker and Kubernetes and Git and Azure DevOps and GitHub. And right, it's like, holy cow, we finally have more than just Putty and a console cable to do our jobs.
Yeah.
So Pat, I think you nailed it, that the tools are here now.
Yeah.
That empower us to work a little bit differently moving forward.
Yeah, we have virtualization now. We have the cloud we can leverage, even though I hate the cloud. But yeah, we have enormous amounts of tools now. Like, and your come up was a lot harder than mine and Pat's. I'll have to admit, our come up was difficult. But
True.
The fact that, like, yeah, you guys barely had like a shoestring and a can. It was like, it must have been hard to just go. The point I'm making is that it was harder to go off and do your own research. Like, it was a time where, like, if you wanted to write a paper, you had to go to a library and like go find the book and really research that. Like, the accessibility of the internet, even computers, it just wasn't available as it is today.
That's true.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I in a shopping mall in my hometown where I live, near my apartment, and I was broke. I was just out of college, but I was trying to find resources to study for these certifications. There was like an old used bookstore that happened to have a small computer book section, and they had like the exam cram books that I needed for my A+ at the time. It's so funny you mentioned libraries, Pat, because I remember finding these discount bookstores that had like, big sections of the big giant reference books for your A+ at the time. Yeah,
I remember those. And I remember the computer magazines too.
Yeah, computer magazines and all that stuff. Yeah, it's a whole different generation.
Yeah, literally, you had to get your information then, like latest tech from like 3.5-inch floppies and like the freebies they used to give you and all that freeware and stuff. Like, it used to be a grind, like, and you thought you were special when you had that stuff. And that was like a $10 subscription. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you couldn't be poor like getting computer magazines because you would want like 2 or 3.
Yeah. No, I hear you. You're right. I think John was hanging around with a chisel and a stone trying to write code back in the day on a stone tablet or whatever. But no, I agree. I think Dean and I's come up were.
I was just going to say, I had to type park before I could shut off my first computer to park the hard drive heads from spinning. That's to date myself. My first computer, you had to type park before he brought the power off on the computer, or he would fry the hard drive because the heads would still spin. So you had to say park to stop the heads, and then you could successfully power down. And I love, it's funny, I have all this gray in my beard now. When I was a young man, we used to derogatorily say the gray beards, the old guys that worked at the company 20 years from the mainframe days.
Yep.
We all called them the gray beards. And here I am 20 years later, and I've got a literal gray beard. I can't believe it. It's so ironic.
That's
the way it goes.
That's
it's
it.
definitely the way. That's funny though. The fact that you have to park. I don't even know what parking a hard disk is, but that is beautiful. It sounds like rewinding VHS to me. Maybe someone don't know what that is.
Yeah. Same era.
Rewind.
Same era, Dean. Same era. And if anybody listening wants to know what a VHS is, it was a video cassette tape that, used magnets. Same era, Dean. Yeah, same
How
era.
bad was it when you wanted to watch a movie and no one would rewind it? That used to be the worst. Yeah, we know when someone watched a movie and they pull it back and they never hit the rewind button. That sucks. Yeah. But no, that's a fantastic story. Fascinating. There's a lot of insight there, for sure. Absolutely. So what are you doing with yourself now, John?
Well, I'm currently at the Canadian Parliament, so the House of Commons of Canada. I'm by the day, I'm engineering and architecting and integrating their network all the time with new things and automation. And then in my free time, I'm publicly learning Python and working on some open source projects. I've done a lot of mind mapping. If you look at markmap.js.org is the website. This technology will take any markdown file and turn it into a mind map. So I've been using things like the REST APIs on the internet or something like DNA Center or ICE and getting the JavaScript back from their API and turning it into mind maps. It's actually been a pretty successful, it's a nice format actually for displaying network state information. We can also use PyATS data. So Python, like you mentioned, getting a show tech command.
Right.
Well, certain Python libraries let us get the structured data back that we can then mind map as well. So like a routing table or something like that. So I've had a lot of fun with that.
Okay. Is that depending on the API you're interfacing with?
Yeah, it depends on, and you can do anything. Major League Baseball's API to Pokemon's API, Star Wars has an API. There's a lot of fun APIs out there. If you're, like you said, you want to be in IT, play with some of your favorite. If you have an interest or a hobby, there's likely an API on the internet. There's one for space. There's one for Marvel Comics.
Nice.
There's one for the X-Men.
That's
name
cool.
it, there's probably an API to play with. Yeah.
That's a good learning curve.
And then download a program called Postman and then start making API calls to some of your favorite APIs just to start playing with the cloud and APIs and Python and Postman. That would be my takeaway. If you really want to get started and you don't know where to start, just Google API and maybe how many people are in space. That's a good one. If you Google how many people are in space, they'll show you the API call you can make, and it will come back and tell you from NASA's database.
That's solid.
I love
That's really cool.
space. I'm such a space nerd. It's not even funny. I love it.
Pat is on the case.
I am on the case.
Oh, you should see the NASA library of APIs. They have the weather on Mars. So the probes on the Mars rovers feed API data back to NASA, and they make it publicly available. You can find out what the temperature on Mars is right now from the API. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Beautiful.
I say pretty cool. Maybe cool's not the right word for a space API.
I'm just being cynical. I'm just messing. But no, that's actually really insightful. I wasn't aware of any of that good stuff NASA provides. But that is actually a great way because it's practical. And I like your Marvel one because I kind of feel like you can make your own like super hero. You could call out your own Iron Man or your own Spider-Man or something like that. But that sounds really up my street, to be fair.
Yeah, what's wrong with a little Superman every now and then, you know?
That's DC, though.
That's true. That's DC.
DC.
Iron Man. So, John, I wanted to turn a little bit.
Although I heard the new one with John Cena is pretty good.
Oh, yeah?
What, Peacemaker? I haven't seen it yet. I've heard it's good, though, too.
Yeah.
One, I'll have to check that out. But two, I wanted to turn a little bit to you wrote a network automation book back in 19, something like that, 2019. And I was reading. I'm slowly making my way through, and I'm about a quarter of the way through the book. It's really well done. So kudos on the book, and being a successful author and all that comes with it. But can you take us a little bit through the process of why the book? Was it just a project for you? Was there something more than that, or your thought process around the book and then releasing?
Sure. I I had read a few other books, so I would recommend Jason Edelman and Matt Oswald's, and I'm missing another author there, but Network Programmability and Automation. Once I read that book, and once I had once I had about a year of successful network automation with Ansible under my belt, I felt I had found kind of the formula, and I wanted to share it. I really just wanted to share. I think you can use IDE, VS Code with Git and a Git repo and this model template approach with Ansible to be successful with network automation. I don't think it needed to be any more complicated than that. I thought I had enough there and enough of a journey from an introduction to a CI/CD pipeline
Nice.
that it would be worth people reading at the time and even still today. So my wife was my editor. She was like excited and we had a lot of fun. I would write a chapter. She would read it and she's not in IT at all. She doesn't know anything about any of this stuff, but she would read a chapter and I would write another chapter and back and forth. And then I sort of reached out to a few different publishers and I kind of shopped around. And then I decided just to self-publish on Amazon because it was a pretty easy process. You download the Kindle Create software. So if anyone listening is an author, would-be author, you want to write a book, if that's something you want to say, it's pretty painless. You get this Kindle Create software, you bring in your Word file of your book, it puts it into chapters, it gives you pagination and page headers, and it gives you the option to let people print and buy a physical copy. It was all pretty painless. And then I kind of just released it and went from there. And I'm really, it had kind of the response I was hoping for. I would do things a little differently now, obviously nothing is perfect. And, it was my first attempt and I did learn a lot along the way. But in terms of, if you're listening to this and you want to be in IT, I know the market for this podcast is people who want to get into IT. Honestly, reach out to me on Twitter. So it's John_Capobianco. And I can get you a PDF of the book, no problem. Just reach out to me. No questions asked. I can send you a PDF. And if you want to buy a copy down the road, that's fine. But if it would help you get into IT or get a sense of what network automation is all about, just say, hey, I heard you on the So You Want to Be an IT podcast, and I'd like a copy of the PDF. No problem.
That's huge. Thank you, John. Yeah,
Look
hear
at
that,
that.
listeners? Free copy. That's amazing. It's huge.
Like all
Thank
the
you so
free stuff
much.
you can get.
I know. So quickly, John, the way you wrote this book, do your scripts or programs run on like your laptop or machine itself, or do they run on like a node in a network, or do they run natively on the networking gear? How, or have you got a mixture of both? Because I know so many people who do automation, and it's different flavors for different types of hardware, and some have sort of like a Python API built in, some pieces of hardware don't. Is there like an approach that fits all? I've done a little bit, but I don't have so is that something you could share with myself and our listeners?
Yeah, sure. So if it's hard to do a fits all solution,
Okay.
unless you have a single vendor, right? So even if you have Cisco, if you're just a Cisco shop, you still might have NXOS and iOS XE and iOS XR, all with their own little subtle differences in syntax,
Right.
all with their different APIs or no APIs, NX API in the data center or REST-conf in the campus. My most successful approach is to use the PyATS library. So if anybody listening, if you want to Google PyATS, all one word, that's the Cisco open source. And it originally started as a testing solution, but you can do everything from configuration management to show commands. If it has a parser, it will give you the JavaScript object notation back.
Okay.
So meaning it's almost like having an API bean for show commands.
Sweet.
So you could do show IP OSPF neighbors, and it'll give you JavaScript back of the neighbors. Yeah. And then because it's JSON, you can work very easily with it with templating languages like Jinja 2 or with Python or right. It's a pretty easy format to work with.
Okay.
More so than standard CLI output, right? Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So that's sort of the formula that I found is PyNCS. And you can do things like PyTS dot device dot configure and then pass it the command you want, VLAN 20. So it's not
Okay. So
limited to just testing or show
yeah.
commands.
So that was my question. Does it do an API call and then the API call does the configuration of a show in the back end, or is it automation where you've kind of running the program and then you're kind of sending commands to the device? Is it, if that makes sense? Because I've seen both.
Yeah.
I'm not saying one's worse than the other.
Yeah.
It's
So
just like two different
you
approaches.
can do both.
Okay. Gotcha.
Two different
Okay.
approaches for sure. And if all things being equal, I prefer working with an API, but really there's no difference because it's the JavaScript. Here, Dean, the key to all of it is structured data.
Right. Okay.
Right. So whether or not it's a parse CLI command or an API call, it's the fact that it's structured data that makes the difference over, standard running commands at the CLI.
Yeah, I kind of feel that the APIs return better data because sometimes, but then I suppose if you're doing real command calls, you get raw data, which you don't really get from the pass from the, it's, I suppose it's what you want to, what you're trying to achieve, I suppose. It's all horse for courses. That's, yeah, interesting. Really interesting.
Well, I hope I didn't do too much talking tonight. I get really excited and get a little carried away. So if you have any other questions or anything else that you wanted to cover before we wrap it up?
Nothing else from me. No. Anything from you, Pat?
No, I'm good. Yeah, we're just about at the hour, so I was gonna do the wrap up spiel and get out of here. So I know there's a ton of podcasts out there these days, and you have your choice. So we appreciate you hanging out and doing one, listening to us. And John, as always, man, this has been awesome. Thank you very much for coming and hanging out. It's been a pleasure talking some automation stuff and talking to just a wide variety of topics and things of that nature. So an absolute pleasure, man. We'll certainly have you back, in the near future and talk some more.
For sure. Yeah, it's been super insightful. Thank you, John. And thank you for the book and all the insight and great info you shared with ourselves and our guests. It's been wonderful. It really has been. It's been really good.
I could probably talk with you guys for another hour or two easily. I really think what you're doing for the community is great. And it changed my life. And if I can give back in any way at all to the community, I'm happy to help. So I'd love to be back. And I'm really excited to follow your success in 2022, guys.
Thank you so much, John.
Yeah. Thanks a bunch, John. We really appreciate you coming and hanging out. So that's going to be it for this week for the show. Just a quick note. We were nominated as a finalist for the Cisco Champion IT Blog Awards. So there's some really great content creators out there that Cisco has picked to win the prestigious Cisco Champion IT Blog Award. So we are part of that. So the link to vote for your favorites, I think they give you a couple votes. They break it out into actual bloggers and then podcasts. So we're obviously in the podcast space. That's where we play in. So I think they give you like a vote of 5 each, I think. So if you like the show, which we hope you do, there is a link to the vote to the website in the show notes. So go and vote for your favorite content creators. And we hope that's us and some other folks out there. So that, and then we also have a survey for you folks that just helps us with some of the content, just some general questions out there, like what day of the week do you listen, or, what do you like best about the show, technical content or interviews, guests, things of that nature. So just helps us tweak the show a little bit, get some feedback from what you folks like or don't like. And that helps with possible advertisers down the road and things of that nature. So if you want to check that out, that is sywbit.com/vote. it.com/survey. And then our Facebook and Twitter handles and all of our socials, that'll be in the show notes as well. We always have our website, so you want to be in it.com. You can subscribe to the show right from there. Some of the bigger popular platforms that we have links to: iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, things of that nature, or just a plain RSS feed. That's up there as well. So you can do it that way if you prefer. Throw us a rating on iTunes. That always helps with their algorithms. It gets us to the, or closer, I should say, to the top of the list, top of the charts, things of that nature. And, just tell a friend, right? Word of mouth works just as well these days in the big, bad technical world that we live in. So word of mouth is just as good. So again, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all of our socials will be in the show notes. Grab them there. The Discord invite, we have a Discord server for you guys to come hang out in. So trying to build that out a little bit. More and more traction over the last few weeks on that. So that's always been a good discussion in there during the day. So the invite is in the show notes as well. And that's it. Again, thanks, John. Thanks, Dean. And we'll see you folks next week.
Thank you. Take care, John. Thanks again for coming on. And we'll be in touch shortly.
Take care, everyone.
Got lots to learn.
Haha. I'm always open. Thanks for having me.
Is there anybody there?